you. Thank you. Can you hear me correctly? Not sure of that. That's kind of a really weird experience for me. So yeah, the point that I just wanted to bring to you today is mainly about the need for much more ethics in training. Obviously, we are all working in the field of education, and we all know that education is a complex, really complex job. But I do think, and I'm perfectly sure that you will share this point of view, that ethics is much more present today than it was before. And then ethics has become something really important in education as well as in our everyday lives. So I just want to mention that and explain you why ethics is so important. The first thing that I want to mention that is something that is clear to all of us is that we have more and more information to process. And it's really hard, first of all, to understand all the information that we're given, but also to make good choices between what is interesting and what is not. So we are now overwhelmed with information today, and it's really, really hard to make a decision based on all those information that we have. Knowledge is definitely much more important than it was 50 years before, and it's expanded. It's expanding at a really fast pace, and we have, and our students, our learners now have to process a lot of information. So it's really difficult for us as educators or actors in the education system to make sure that all learners will be able to use this knowledge, use this information in order to do something that will be great for the society they live in, will all live in. The point is that if we go on working as we are actually working today, which is basically teaching different subjects, one at a time, with really low interferences between each subject, obviously it's really hard to help students and help learners to understand what are the connections between the different subjects that we are talking about during our programs. So the point is that we really need now, and it's something that we are doing at aivancity, we really need hybridization. And hybridization is definitely not, you can see the picture on the slide here. It's not only kind of a multi-layer program with different field of studies, with different subjects that will be tackled, each one on its side. It's much more also than just having a little bit of ethics or a little bit of humanities in a bigger program. Like, let's say you're working in the computer science and we'll have 2, 3, 4 hours of ethics. It's not enough. We really need to have something that is much more complex. We need to help our learners to make inferences between all the subject they're dealing with. And obviously, ethics is here to create links between those different subjects. As you can see at aivancity, we have 3 different pillars. The first one is technology, the second one is business, and the third one is society. In society, what we mean by society exactly is our responsibility as, let's say, scientists or as computer scientists. What are our responsibilities toward the society? And then ethics is here specifically to make links between all the subjects that will be studied and that will be addressed during the whole program. For technologies, and especially for artificial intelligence, is really, really important. Obviously, you know that artificial intelligence is everywhere, is surrounding us. We're currently using it. Sometimes we have, and we are using artificial intelligence without even knowing it. So the problem that we have today is that if you really focus only on the technological aspect of artificial intelligence, its development, its use, and its marketing, you will not really understand what the consequences of development and the use of those systems can be for the society. So you definitely need something else that will bring all that together and give you a big picture about education related to technology and especially artificial intelligence. Once again, here ethics, but not only ethics, laws are also really important. We'll just bring this kind of link between everything, because I do think that education, and we're losing that, we're losing this of sight, is mainly to educate people to be part of a society. It is exactly what we want, right? So we want them to learn in order them to use their skills and competencies, the capabilities for the sake of the society they live in, will live in, right? So if we lose sight of that, at some point we are not really doing our job correctly. So when we try to educate people now, it's really difficult to help them to make inferences. I'm teaching in different places, and sometimes it's really hard for, and especially younger students, to understand that everything is linked with everything, right? When I was teaching international relation, it was really hard to make them understand that international relations is not only about diplomacy, it's not only about military affairs, it's also about economy, it's also about technology, it's about education, about else. It's about a lot of things that have into account in order to understand the big picture. So this is where hybridization is really important, just to help making link between things that seems at first sight really different from each other and that in the real world are really related to one another. So obviously, because I'm teaching ethics, AI ethics, I would definitely recommend that education should focus on ethics. But it's not enough to say that. It's really complex to focus on ethics because ethics is a really complex field of study. If you tackle it through only the philosophical stance, it can be really dry, and it's really difficult to have people being interested in philosophy. So at some point you have to withdraw from the philosophical aspect of ethics and to bring it back to the reality of the world without avoiding to talk about philosophy. So in that sense, I would definitely stress the fact that ethics can be seen as a layer cake. You can see that on the slide here. So when you're talking about ethics, when you're dealing with ethics, there is many ways to see ethics. First of all, there is many definition of what ethics is, the difference between moral and ethics. I will not dive into that. It's, I guess, too complex and a bit too long. But what I really want to stress here is that ethics is not singular. It's a plural world, right? It's a plural world and word. I mean, you don't have only one ethics. Conversely to what we believe, and especially when I say we, I mean we the Westerners, we do think that ethics is quite easy. It's all about bad and wrong, and we are using always the same tools to assess ethically actions. But we have to know that ethics is really subjective, and it depends on culture. So, like a multi-layer cake, you can either taste each layer independently, and you will have a different flavor each time, or you can hit the whole slice at once, and then you will have a mix of flavor. And what we are aiming at, what we should aim at, is to have this mix of flavor. We should definitely avoid having this perspective of ethics as different layer, really separated by cream, which is not the case. We really need now, and especially in the globalist world, to have the full spectrum of the flavors of this layer cake. So when we want to go with ethics, it's really important to have a really broad approach of what ethics is. If we have a too narrow approach, and especially in the education system, at some point we will introduce something that we all reject, which is bias. Okay, and we are all talking, especially in the artificial intelligence system, we are all talking about biases regarding gender, skin colors, social status, and this kind of things. But we tend to forget the fact that the first bias that we have, and especially us in the West, is to have one unique perspective. And this unique perspective, especially on ethics and ethics of AI, is that we are reading things through the unique lens of what we call continental philosophy, namely deontology, consequentialism, and virtue ethics. So you can either see the cake as a wall piece, white one, and don't look into it, so you will feel like ethics is something really easy. It's just something that deals with bad and wrong, acceptable and not acceptable. Or you can cut a slice and then you will see different layers, so you can just taste one layer at a time, so you will have only one flavor at a time. Or you can cut the slice and try to take all the layer at one time, and then you will have a very different flavor. You will have something that will be very rich. And I guess that when we are baking the cake, we don't want people to hit one flavor at a time. We want they to have this mix of cake. So ethics is exactly the same. When you're talking about ethics, and especially in the globalized world, you really need to have all the different layers that will be visible. You have to explain what ethics is about. You have to cover the full spectrum of ethics, but at some point, you will have to try to find a way to mix all that together to make people understand how ethics can be used and why it is so important in our everyday life, and especially in education. That's definitely a challenge, obviously, because we are all biased by our own culture. So when we teach ethics, we used to teach it through the perspective of our own culture without taking into account the culture of others. So it's a strong effort that we have to do in the education system, just open our mind to different culture, different wisdom, different religion, different political stances, and just maybe withdraw from our own perspective and just have a big picture on that in order to explain our students and our learners how ethics can be used in this really complex world that we're living in. Ethics is really important here because, as I was saying, it's a link between different subjects. It can help us to make inferences between different fields of studies. But it's also important because ethics is first and foremost a relation with others. It is something that mediates our relation to other people, but not only other people, also to the environment we live in. You've all heard about the ethics of environment. So there is a lot of question about our action, our behavior regarding the impact that it can have on the environment. So ethics is also here to mitigate actually the risks regarding our action toward the environment and toward other people. So ethics must be seen as a tool to mediate this relation. Its cultural dimension, as I was saying, is really important. If you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that ethics is made of different things. It's made partly of law, it's made partly of moral, of standards and convictions. So it's the mix of all those information, all of these things that will make you actually act in a specific way, ethically or not ethically. Ethics basically is contextual, meaning that ethics is about how you will act in a specific way regarding all the constraints that you have in your own life. We live under laws, we live under moral rules, we live under standards and convictions, and then at some point regarding a specific situation, we have to make a decision. So this is something that we really have to bring into the education system today, because it's really important for people to understand that ethics is not something that is imposed from the bottom, from the top to the bottom. It's something that comes from yourself, right? There must be, and there are definitely rules that are imposed from the top, and laws are here to explain that. Moral is part of it. But ethics at the very end is a choice that individuals are making in a very specific situation. So regarding education, once again, it's really important to make people understand that every time they act, every time they make a decision, their ethics is at stake. They have to make ethical choices. And it's really important because what I've seen in my experience is that most of the time people, when they make decisions, they just put the burden of the responsibility on the shoulders of other people, let's say the government, let's say the institutions, but they do not really assume their own responsibilities. If you put ethics in education and if you explain people that ethics is mainly about your own choices in a specific environment for a specific purpose, then you bring the responsibility back to individuals, which is really important, I guess, in today's world. And if you want to do so, obviously you have to take into account the culture of the people you're talking to and the people you're interacting with. It's really hard when you have people from lots of countries all around the world in your classroom to explain them that the reality or the real world is made of only one ethics, which is the Western ethics. If you go to China, obviously ethics is seen as a very different way as it can be seen in India or in France or in the US or in another country. So it's really important to have this multicultural approach and bring back ethics to what it is exactly. It's a matter of personal or individual behavior and action. And then the other point I wanted to mention also is that it's not enough to teach ethics. You also have to show ethics, right? Because most of the time people will learn, obviously, ethics, but they will also experience it. And they will experience it in two different ways. The first one is because they will face difficulties when they will have to make ethical choices. They will face what we call the ethical dilemma. So they will have to make decision in this kind of difficult situation, but they will also experience it through the people with whom they are interacting. And obviously, teachers and educators are part of that. If you are an example, if you are showing how to act in an ethical way, obviously people will learn from this experience of interaction with educators. So once again, the first effort that we have to do in the education system is obviously to open our mind to different system, different perspective on ethics, but it's also to be ourselves ethical. I mean, to have a behavior that is acceptable for all the people around us. Sorry. So, what is really important with ethics? It's to focus on this idea of responsibility. What we're doing actually at aivancity is we're training people that we want to be responsible toward what? Toward the society. When you're training people, when you're educating people, obviously you want to have them participate to the society they live in. You want that their training will benefit the society we live in. So responsibility is definitely something really important, and that must be oriented toward the need of the society and the well-being of the society. Obviously, in that, there is a responsibility to also train people to be happy with what they're doing. You want them to be fulfilled, definitely. But once again, we are social beings, and the very end of the training is oriented toward the society we live in. So we can address that through two different angles. The first one is obviously the individual responsibility and accepting the fact that whatever the choices we're making, whatever the decision we're making, we are at some point responsible for that. And it's really too easy to just put the responsibility on the shoulders of others. So we have to bring back responsibility toward us. And the other point is obviously the collective responsibility, knowing that we are part of a bigger community. It might be a nation, it might be a cultural community, it can be a religious community. It doesn't matter. We are part of something bigger than just us as individual. So we also have in education to bring this aspect of collective responsibility. When we talk about, for example, artificial intelligence, as when we talk about environment, there is obviously an individual responsibility that is held by each of us, but there is also a collective responsibility in what we're doing and the kind of society we're aiming at. Because that, I guess, is the big question we have to all ask ourselves is, where are we going? Where do we want to go in the future? Do we really want to go in let's say, a society where artificial intelligence is everywhere and where we've actually lost control over technology, or do we want to be able to control it in a different way, right? So depending on the kind of society that you are aiming at, your ethics and your responsibility will be different. But the first thing that we have to do collectively is to think about what's the next step. What are we looking for in terms of society that we want to do? So if we want to train people to think about the future, the society, their role in the society, and their behavior, the decision in the society, we definitely have to put ethics at the core of education program. I really think that it's not only about technology, it's not only about artificial intelligence. I found that in political science, when I was teaching political science and international relations, you can find that in the health education, you can find that in the law. Obviously, ethics is at the core of everyone's behavior. So it's really something that must be taken really seriously. So far, my experience is that ethics is kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 hours in a bigger program, and that's not enough. That's definitely not enough. I think that, and this is why at aivancity we've made the choice to have this 25% of the program based on society and ethical issues, because we do think that at the very end, education is aiming at providing the society with responsible people. So I think my time is over. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments on that.
Don't hesitate to write in a public chat or raise hand to ask some question.
There is no.
Okay, so I think there is no questions.
No questions.
No questions. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for contributing to this focus session.
No
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Let's applause to Emmanuel.
Take care. Bye.